Do you ever find yourself staring at the UEFA coefficient charts, wondering why it has to be this way? England, Spain, Italy, Germany, blah. And thinking to yourself, wouldn't it be fun if Hungary had the best league in Europe? No? Just me? Okay, we move. Over the years, I've come to consider myself as somewhat of an expert at this particular type of building a nation state. To clarify, I mean I've spent a lot of time doing this, not that I'm actually any good at it. And in this video, I'm firstly going to explain what this type of save actually is and how you can do it, but also to impart all of the wisdom I've picked up over the years for how to get the most out of a save like this. For this year's version of the save, we've chosen Hungary, and more specifically MTK Budapest, one of the fallen giants of the country. In fact, as this video was posted, I'm now live right now over on Twitch, beginning our journey with MTK. So why not drop on over after you've watched this video? The aim of the save is simple. Take Hungary from where they currently sit, in this case 26th in the UEFA coefficient charts, all the way to the top to overtake the likes of England, Spain, Italy, Germany, and co. The coefficient table determines how many European places a specific nation gets, as well as which round its respective teams enter in those different competitions. The higher you sit in the coefficients, the more European places you get. So you're probably thinking, sure, no problem, just build my team up over several years, start winning some stuff in Europe, win a load of Champions Leagues, sorted. Easy as piss, right? Wrong. Even if you won the Champions League 5 years in a row, which is what the coefficients are based upon, that's unlikely to even get you to crack the top 4 or 5. You have to find a way to build up the entire league as one without taking charge of any of the other clubs except your own. And that, my friends, is where the real challenge lies. So how exactly do we go about doing that? Well, I'm glad you asked. You did ask, right? Now, full disclosure, in my previous attempts to do this, my best 2 results so far were getting Norway up to 3rd and Ireland up to 3rd. Now, I believe that the Irish one is a bigger achievement on account of the fact that they start like 42nd in the coefficients compared to Norway that are somewhere in the mid-20s. But I still believe, in spite of all that it is possible to take an unfancied nation all the way to the top. The exact save file that I will be using for this save will be posted in the stream chat channel over on the Discord server in case you want to download it and play alongside me with the exact same save. So what follows are all the little tidbits and tips and tricks that I've picked up over the years on how to do this to hopefully help both me and you on your respective building a nation journeys. First things first, picking the nation and the team that you want to build. This might sound quite trivial, but honestly, picking wrong here could basically stop your save from being successful before you've even got started. One of the biggest factors in a save like this is the strength of the other teams in your nation's top division. So with that in mind, you're going to want to avoid signing players from those teams because that will then weaken them and make them less effective when it comes to competing in European competitions. But of course, coming with that means you're going to have to sign players from somewhere, and usually that means non-EU and foreign players. And with that in mind, it's important to choose a league that has quite relaxed rules when it comes to the number of foreign players that are allowed. All this information can usually be gathered on the league rules page, but sometimes it does pay to start a save and look at the individual squad registration rules too, should they come and surprise you at the very end. Poland is an excellent starting nation, for example, as is Hungary, and also the Republic of Ireland, which is why we chose it last year, because it literally has no squad rules. Well, there's one, but you'll never fall foul of it. It's worth knowing though that because we're starting this in the second tier with MTK Budapest, there are actually some quite restrictive squad rules here. The idea would be to get out of this league as quickly as possible so we don't have to worry about things like that. Once you've selected your nation, choosing a club within that nation is just as important. We could take over one of the larger sides, in this case someone like Ferencváros, and get stuck straight into Europe. But there are drawbacks, and the issue is quite simple really. If you take over a side like Ferencváros, you're taking an existing giant and making them even better. The best course of action really is to take a side from the second division or lower of your chosen nation and then bring them to the top table as well. That way you are adding an additionally strong side to that top table rather than just strengthening what's already there. You're adding an extra leg to your IKEA table because it's wobbling. It's a terrible analogy, run with it. In this case, we lucked out and were able to choose MTK Budapest, one of the sort of former giants of Hungarian football, and thus we get to hit several birds with one stone. And sort of briefly on the topics of signing players from your domestic rivals, occasionally a scenario could present itself whereby a very, very strong player comes through the academy at one of those teams, and naturally they're going to interest sides from the big European nations. Now, this is one of the few opportunities where I would say it's okay to try to sign that player to prevent them from leaving the league, because it opens up the opportunity for one of two things. Either you can convince that player to take a 2-year loan deal back to the club that they were already at and thus keep them in the league a little bit longer before they join you, or there is a somewhat cheeky thing that you can do whereby you convince the player to sign for you, but at the very last minute you cancel the deal, and it tends to drop a lot of the interest from the other European sides as well. That's a little bit on the cheeky side, but it is a thing you can do, I suppose, as a last resort. I really wish I had a lot more visuals for stuff like this. It's just since we're at the very start of the save, we're having to make do with sort of our imagination. So join me, if you will, in imagination land as we go and talk about the loan farm, which for me is one of the most important factors in this type of save. The worldwide rules in football with regard to loans are changing very, very soon over the next couple of years. And this might be one of the last FMs that you can actually pull off something of this ilk. Now, it seems from several of the tests that myself and others have done that certain nations are already implementing those rules as the saves progress from, I believe, 2024 onwards. But Hungary, at the moment, from what we can tell, does not seem to be affected by this, and thus you can still loan out as many players as you want to as many teams as you want. But that is one of the main things that will be changing about the loan systems in the coming seasons. So it's useful to bear that in mind before you pick a nation. Worth just checking into the future. Might even be worth doing some tests of your own to make sure that you don't get stuck later down the line. So what exactly is a loan farm, and how do we build one? The idea itself is simple. AI-controlled clubs tend to do appalling business when it comes to them getting any money of their own. So by us doing well in Europe and potentially them joining us in that endeavor, they will inevitably end up with more money. The problem is they have absolutely no clue how to spend it on anyone useful. So with that, we found that the best method to help them help themselves, as it were, is to loan them players. Loan them a lot of players. Getting as many talented young players out on loan to other teams in your domestic division is unbelievably important, as it will allow them to strengthen their squads for the inevitable European campaigns that will follow, thus allowing you to get more coefficient points and then, of course, help build the nation. But it also helps on another level. By the clubs having an enormous amount of high-quality players on loan from yourself, the perceived strength of their squad is increased, and thus it does seem to allow the clubs to bring in higher quality players on permanent transfers. Now, I admit a lot of that is anecdotal, but it does seem to be a pattern that I've noticed over the last couple of FMs. Their increased squad strength also seems to make them a more attractive destination for your own loan players as you start to bring in more and more high-quality players over the years. Once things really get started with stuff like this, they tend to snowball extremely quickly. I remember at certain periods during my Treaty United save last year, we had nearly 100 players out on loan, almost exclusively to other Irish sides, and there was only like 10 sides in the top division. You'll want to get the system started as soon as you possibly can. Once you're capable of qualifying for the group stages of one of the many different UEFA competitions, that's pretty much the time to start things, as you'll start to get a little bit more cash and clout knocking about. As by this point, you'll be able to hopefully start scouting some young, impressive talent, not just from the nation that you're currently in, and you can start to build that farm up. And as my giant light above me has finally sprung into life for the first time today, it's time to talk about loan best practices, everyone's favorite topic. Essentially, there are a set of best practices when it comes to finding loans for your players that I believe maximize the efficiency of the loan systems within FM. I'm not going to go over it in huge detail here because it can be quite in depth, but I have left a link in the description to a video I made on the previous FM that should still completely apply, as I don't think anything in that has changed, to run you through it if you want more information about how to maximize the number of loans you can get. As soon as a loan farm player joins your club and is eligible, you're going to want to get them on the development list as fast as physically possible. So for an example here, we're just going to choose this 18-year-old chap here called Engelbert. I mean, who wouldn't want to loan Engelbert? And to do that, you're going to want to right click on them, hit transfer and hit add to development list, which should then bring you over to this. If you have a loan manager, you can set them responsible for this. At the moment, our head of youth development is currently in charge, but that will depend entirely on your save. You can set all the criteria that you want over on this side of thing. The only thing I would really touch is to clarify, of course, that it is the Hungarian, in this case, teams that we want him to be loaned to. I found the development list doesn't actually find loans directly for your players, if at all. However, what it does seem to do is drum up interest in those players, which you can then action by pushing them out the door manually. Then, at the start of every domestic transfer window, you can then look through the players that you want to then find a loan for and offer them all out individually. I have a custom view that allows me to filter it purely by loan listed players, which is helpful. You'll find the link to that in the description of the loan video I talked about. But when it comes to offering players out manually, I find that there's a certain method that seems to work the best to get more bids. That is to, of course, offer them to clubs, set them up the loans, you know the drill here. However, to give them the best chance of finding a loan move to another Hungarian side in this case, you want to obviously go to targets. Now, you might think that the best course of action here would be to exclude foreign clubs, because of course that would only leave Hungary. However, we found, and again, this is slightly anecdotal, but there seems to be a lot of evidence to suggest this, that doing that does not get as many loan bids from Hungarian sides in this case as this other method. So what you do is you go to add up here, go to all clubs from nation and Hungary. and there you go. You'd think it'd be the same, but it seems to work slightly better. After you've gone through the list and done that, you will get some bids, but then every few days, check back in on this list and keep an eye on these wanted symbols, because sometimes they will just appear at random for a single day, and you want to make sure that you can get on top of this. Using this, we doubled the number of loanees that we had out from somewhere in the mid-50s up to the mid-90s. You may well find a player that you loaned out several seasons ago has developed incredibly out on loan, but do resist the temptation to bring them back unless they're going to be an absolute world beater for you. They are almost certainly doing more good out on loan than they would be for you. It's important to sort of triage players when you're signing them and give them designations, be it a player who you want to keep and develop yourself, be it a player you want to send out on loan to develop and then bring back, or a player that you believe you'll be totally happy if they stay out on loan forever. We had a couple of guys that were literally on loan for 15, 16 seasons consecutively on my last save. To the same club as well. As you get deeper and deeper into the save and your team grows, don't be afraid to start signing players purely for the purpose of loaning them to other teams in your league. They may never be good enough for you, but the quality that they could present to another team in your domestic division is utterly huge. So if you've got a little bit of extra cash knocking about, don't be afraid to just pick up players on that. There is, however, one massive pitfall that you could potentially fall into, so it would be remiss of me to make this video and not mention it. And that is this. If a team loses their manager either through sacking or him just leaving at the very end of a season, and they don't replace that manager, by the time you get that email comes through that says, would you like to extend all of these loan options? If they don't have a manager during that period, they will reject and refund essentially all of the players that you've got out on loan to them, no matter what you do. It's very annoying because the moment they get a new manager, they're going to start trying to loan players again. But if it does happen, it happens. It's just one of those things. Happened to me twice last year. One team ended up with 5 senior players after they sent all the loans back. So that went well for them. One final thing to note about doing a save like this is you have to be patient. Rome was not built in a day. My Treaty United save over in Ireland took 32 seasons to get to where we ended up finishing off, although we actually did reach third quite a few years before that and were just unable to get back to it. And the same applies to my Tromsø save over in Norway. That took us 26 seasons to get Norway up to third. It is very much one for the patient players, but if you are looking for a long-term save, then I genuinely believe that the challenge that this presents is exactly what you are looking for. And don't worry, I will be doing the yearly recaps of the stream save over here on the main channel as well, but with a bit more pizzazz this year. So drop a like on the video, subscribe if you're new, and happy nation building.